When I found my sister Celeste's diary hidden behind a false wall in our new mansion, the last entry made my blood run cold. Her handwriting was shaky, desperate. They're watching me from the garden. I can't let them find what's buried beneath the rose bushes. If something happens to me, tell Vera I'm sorry. Before we dive in, tell us where in the world are you watching from? If you enjoy stories like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow's episode is truly mind-blowing. Let's get started. My name is Vera Thorne. 3 months ago, my little sister disappeared without a trace during what was supposed to be a simple hiking trip in the Oregon mountains. The police searched for weeks. They found her abandoned car at a trailhead, her backpack by a creek, but never found her. The case went cold. Everyone told me to accept that she was gone. I couldn't accept it. I wouldn't accept it. So when our grandmother left us a small inheritance, I did something that shocked everyone who knew me. I bought a house. Not just any house, but a crumbling, abandoned 1920s mansion that had been sitting empty for 40 years. The Blackwood estate cost me every penny of that inheritance money, but I had a plan. I'm a contractor. I flip houses for a living, and I thought throwing myself into this massive renovation project would help me deal with the grief. Keep my hands busy so my mind wouldn't spiral into dark places thinking about what might have happened to Celeste. The locals in Millbrook Falls thought I was crazy. This wasn't just any old house. The Blackwood estate had a reputation. People crossed the street rather than walk past its rusted iron gates. They whispered stories about strange lights in the windows, about the 3 generations of Blackwoods who had died there under mysterious circumstances. But I don't believe in ghost stories. I believe in hard work, in fixing what's broken, in moving forward. At least that's what I believed until I started swinging that sledgehammer. I was working on the master bedroom, trying to open up the space by taking down what I thought was a non-load-bearing wall. The sledgehammer went through easier than it should have. Too easy. There was a hollow sound, then suddenly a chunk of plaster and wood crashed inward, revealing a hidden compartment about the size of a small closet. My heart started pounding before I even looked inside. Something about finding a secret room in a house where my missing sister's name was carved into one of the wooden beams in the basement felt like more than coincidence. But what I found in that hidden space made my legs go weak. Celeste's brown leather journal, the one she carried everywhere, was sitting on a small wooden shelf like someone had placed it there carefully. Next to it was her favorite silver bracelet, the one with the tiny moon charm that our mom had given her for her 16th birthday. And scattered around these items were dozens of old black and white photographs showing people in formal 1940s clothing standing in front of this very mansion. I picked up that journal with trembling hands, and when I opened it to the last entry, I saw words that changed everything I thought I knew about my sister's disappearance. This wasn't about a hiking accident. This wasn't about getting lost in the woods. Celeste had been here, in this house, the night she vanished. The mansion I bought to escape my grief had somehow become the key to finding the truth about what happened to her, and that truth, I was about to learn, was darker and more dangerous than anything I could have imagined. To understand why finding Celeste's diary in that hidden room shook me to my core, you need to know who my sister was and why our last conversation still haunts me 3 months later. Celeste and I were complete opposites. I'm the older sister by 6 years, the practical one who always had a plan. I started my construction company at 25 and built it into something successful through pure determination and 16-hour workdays. I believe in things you can measure, things you can fix with the right tools and enough elbow grease. Celeste was different. She was an artist, a dreamer who painted these incredible abstract pieces that somehow captured emotions I didn't even know existed. She believed in energy fields and spiritual connections. She could walk into a room and immediately tell you if something bad had happened there years ago. She said old places held memories in their walls. I thought it was nonsense. Our last conversation happened over dinner at my house in Portland. Celeste had been acting strange for weeks, talking about vivid dreams and feeling drawn to places she'd never been. She kept mentioning this old mansion she'd seen in one of her dreams, describing details that seemed impossibly specific. "Vera, I think I'm supposed to help someone," she said, pushing her food around her plate. "There's this little girl, and she's been trying to tell me something important." She shows me this big house with rose bushes, and there's something buried that needs to be found. I set down my fork harder than necessary. Celeste, you're talking about dreams like they're real. You can't help a little girl from a dream. You can't solve mysteries that exist only in your imagination. Her eyes filled with tears. You never believe me. You think everything I feel is just made up. Because it is made up, I snapped. You're 28 years old. When are you going to stop living in fantasy land and deal with reality? She stood up from the table. Maybe when you stop being so afraid of anything you can't control that you've forgotten how to actually live. That was the last thing she ever said to me. 3 days later, she left for what she called a spiritual retreat in the Oregon mountains. Her car was found abandoned at a trailhead near Mount Hood. Her backpack was discovered by a creek 2 miles from the parking area. But Celeste was gone. The search lasted 18 days. Volunteers, search and rescue teams, even helicopters scoured those mountains. They found nothing else. No trace of where she might have gone or what might have happened to her. Everyone told me to prepare for the worst. The detective assigned to her case, a kind woman named Officer Martinez, gently suggested that people don't usually survive alone in the wilderness for more than a few days, especially not someone like Celeste who had never been camping in her life. But I refused to believe she was dead. Call it denial, call it false hope. But something inside me insisted that my little sister was still out there somewhere. When our grandmother's inheritance came through 2 weeks later, I made a decision that surprised everyone who knew me. Instead of investing the money wisely or expanding my business, I bought the Blackwood estate site unseen for $180,000. The mansion had been abandoned for 40 years. The previous owner died in a nursing home and his estate just wanted to get rid of the property. It needed everything: new plumbing, electrical work, roof repairs, foundation stabilization. It was exactly the kind of massive project I needed to keep my hands busy and my mind occupied. What I didn't expect were the warnings from the locals in Millbrook Falls. My neighbor, Mrs. Delphine Russo, brought me homemade cookies on my second day there. She was 82, a tiny Italian woman who had lived in the same house for 50 years. But when she looked at the Blackwood estate, she crossed herself. "That house has a dark history, dear," she said, glancing nervously at the mansion's boarded windows. The Blackwood family built it in 1923, and 3 generations of them died there under strange circumstances. The last one, old Evangeline Blackwood, lived alone for 30 years after her little daughter drowned. Neighbors said they could hear her crying at night, calling the child's name. I thanked her for the cookies and politely dismissed the stories. Every old house has ghost tales attached to it. People love drama, especially in small towns where nothing exciting happens. But now, holding Celeste's diary in my hands, those warnings felt different. My sister, who believed in spiritual messages and dreams about little girls needing help, had somehow ended up in the very place the locals whispered about, and she had been trying to tell me something before she vanished. I sat on the dusty floor of that hidden room for 20 minutes, just staring at Celeste's journal. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely turn the pages. But what I found inside those pages turned my entire understanding of my sister's disappearance upside down. The first entry was dated 4 months ago, just 2 weeks after our grandmother's funeral. Celeste had written about having the same dream repeatedly. She described a little girl with dark curls standing in front of a massive house, pointing toward a garden full of white roses. The child never spoke, but somehow Celeste knew she was asking for help. I kept reading. Entry after entry described these dreams becoming more vivid, more urgent. Celeste had started researching historic homes in Oregon, looking for anything that matched what she saw in her sleep. Then, 6 weeks before she disappeared, she found it. "I drove to Millbrook Falls today," she had written. "The Blackwood estate is exactly what I've been seeing. Same wrought iron gates, same stone facade, same rose garden. I sat in my car outside for an hour, and I swear I saw a little girl watching me from an upstairs window. When I blinked, she was gone." My blood ran cold. Celeste had been visiting this place for weeks before she vanished, and I had no idea. The entries became more frequent after that first visit. She had been coming to the mansion almost every weekend, sometimes sneaking onto the property at night. She wrote about cold spots in certain rooms, about hearing children's laughter coming from the basement, about the overwhelming sadness she felt near the rose garden. But it was her research that really terrified me. Celeste had spent hours at the local library and historical society, digging into the Blackwood family history. What she found was worse than the ghost stories Mrs. Russo had told me. The mansion was built in 1923 by Evangeline and Theodore Blackwood, a wealthy couple who had made their fortune in timber. They had one child, a daughter named Cordelia, born in 1935. According to the official records, 8-year-old Cordelia drowned in the estate's ornamental pond in August 1943. But Celeste had found newspaper clippings that told a different story. The local papers from 1943 mentioned inconsistencies in the police report. Neighbors had heard arguing the night Cordelia died. There were whispers that Evangeline had been suffering from severe mental health issues, that she had become paranoid and violent after her husband died in a logging accident earlier that year. One article, buried in the back pages of the Millbrook Falls Gazette, quoted an anonymous neighbor. That poor child was terrified of her own mother. Evangeline would lock her in the basement for hours as punishment. The night Cordelia died, we heard screaming coming from that house. Not the kind of screaming you hear when someone drowns by accident. The official investigation was brief and superficial. Evangeline Blackwood was a respected member of the community with powerful friends. The case was closed quickly, ruled an accidental drowning. Cordelia was buried in the local cemetery, and Evangeline lived alone in the mansion for another 30 years until her death in 1973. But here's what made my stomach drop. In her final entries, Celeste had found evidence that the official story was a lie. She had discovered that the pond where Cordelia supposedly drowned was only 18 inches deep. She had found groundskeeping records showing that the rose garden had been completely replanted in September 1943, just 1 month after the child's death. And most disturbing of all, she had located the original police photographs of Cordelia's body, stored in the county archives. The injuries don't match a drowning, Celeste had written. There are bruises on her neck, defensive wounds on her arms. This little girl was murdered, and her mother buried her somewhere else entirely. The final entry, dated the day before, Celeste disappeared, was written in handwriting so shaky I could barely read it. I know where Cordelia is really buried. The dreams have been showing me the exact spot for weeks. She's under the rose bushes, not in that cemetery plot. But there's something else buried with her. Something that proves Evangeline didn't kill her own daughter. Someone else was in that house the night Cordelia died. Someone who had just as much to lose if the truth came out. I'm going to dig tonight. I have to give this child the justice she deserves. If something happens to me, tell Vera I'm sorry for all the times she didn't believe me. I'm sorry I couldn't explain it better. The dead do speak to those willing to listen. The journal ended there. But paperclipped to the back cover was something that made me gasp out loud. A hand-drawn map of the rose garden with a large X marked over a specific area, and a note in Celeste's handwriting that simply said, "She's here. She's been trying to tell everyone for 80 years. I stared at that hand-drawn map until my vision blurred. Everything logical in my brain screamed that this was insane. I was a rational person, a contractor who solved problems with blueprints and building codes, not ghost stories and century-old mysteries. But holding my sister's journal, seeing her desperate handwriting, I knew I couldn't walk away. Celeste had risked everything to uncover the truth about what happened to Cordelia Blackwood. If she was right, if there really was evidence buried in that rose garden that could prove an 8-year-old girl's murder had been covered up for 80 years, then I owed it to both of them to finish what she started. But I wasn't going to do it alone. I called my Uncle Jerome that night. He's my dad's younger brother, a retired police detective who spent 35 years working homicide cases in Portland. If anyone would understand the importance of what Celeste had discovered, it would be him. Plus, Jerome had been the one helping me search for Celeste after she disappeared. He knew how desperate I was to find answers. "Jerome, I need you to drive down to Millbrook Falls tomorrow," I said when he answered the phone. "I found something that changes everything about Celeste's disappearance." There was a pause. "What kind of something?" "The kind that might be evidence in a murder case. An old murder case." Jerome arrived the next morning with a duffel bag full of equipment I hadn't expected. Professional cameras, evidence bags, measuring, tools, and a metal detector. He listened without interrupting as I explained everything I'd found in Celeste's journal, every detail about Cordelia Blackwood's suspicious death, every piece of research that suggested the official story was a lie. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. Finally, he looked at me with the same expression he used to have when he was working a case. "Vera, if your sister is right about this, we're not just digging up a garden. We're potentially disturbing a crime scene that's been untouched for 8 decades. We need to do this right." Jerome insisted on documenting everything. He photographed Celeste's journal, page by page. He mapped out the exact location of the hidden room where I'd found her belongings. He even called in a favor with a friend who ran a private investigation firm to get access to those archived police photos Celeste had mentioned. When we compared the 1943 crime scene photos to Celeste's research notes, Jerome's expression grew grim. "Your sister was right," he said, pointing to marks visible on the child's neck in the grainy black and white images. "These injuries are consistent with manual strangulation, not drowning. Someone killed this little girl, and it wasn't her mother." We spent that afternoon preparing for the excavation. Jerome rented professional ground-penetrating radar equipment to avoid damaging anything we might find. I brought in portable floodlights and a generator so we could work after dark, when curious neighbors wouldn't see what we were doing. Mrs. Russo appeared at my door just as we were setting up the equipment. "I know what you're planning to do," she said, her elderly voice shaking. "I can see it in your eyes. You're going to dig up that garden." I started to deny it, but she held up a weathered hand. "My late husband Salvatore worked as a groundskeeper for the Blackwoods when he first came to America. He helped Evangeline replant that entire rose garden in September 1943. He never talked about what he saw that night, but it haunted him for 60 years. On his deathbed, he made me promise never to tell anyone what he buried under those roses." My heart was pounding. "Mrs. Russo, what did your husband see?" She closed her eyes. "He saw Evangeline carrying something small wrapped in a white sheet, out to the garden at midnight. She was crying, begging God to forgive her. But she wasn't alone, Vera. There was a man with her, a man who spoke with a thick accent and wore expensive clothes. He's the one who made her dig the hole. He's the one who threatened to kill her too if she ever told anyone the truth." Jerome stepped forward. "Mrs. Russo, is there anything else your husband told you about that night?" "He said the man buried something else with the child. Papers, he thought. Documents that were important enough to kill for." She looked directly at me. "Your sister wasn't the first person to come asking questions about Cordelia Blackwood. Every few years, someone gets curious about what really happened that night. Most of them get scared off by warnings or small accidents, but some of them disappear." The weight of what she was telling us hit me like a physical blow. Celeste hadn't just stumbled onto an old cold case. She had uncovered something that people were still willing to kill to keep secret. But that only made me more determined to finish what she started.
We started digging at sunset, working by the harsh glare of portable floodlights that cast eerie shadows across the overgrown rose garden. Jerome operated the metal detector while I carefully removed layers of soil with a hand trowel, treating every inch like the crime scene it might be. 2 feet down, the metal detector started beeping frantically. "Something's here," Jerome said, his voice tight with anticipation. "Something big." My hands were shaking as I brushed away the dirt. What emerged wasn't what either of us expected. Instead of bones or a child's remains, we found a metal strongbox, roughly the size of a briefcase, wrapped in oilcloth that had somehow survived 8 decades underground. Jerome photographed everything before we lifted it out. The box was heavier than it looked, and when we pried it open back in the mansion's kitchen, what we found inside made my blood run cold. The first thing I saw was a stack of documents tied with string. Letters written in German, stamped with official Nazi seals. But it was the photographs underneath that made me gasp. Black and white images showing the Blackwood Mansion's basement transformed into a meeting room, with Nazi flags hanging from the walls and men in SS uniforms sitting around a large table. "Jesus Christ," Jerome whispered, picking up one of the photographs. "Vera, this mansion was being used as a Nazi safe house during World War II." But the most shocking discovery was a leather-bound ledger filled with names, dates, and dollar amounts. It was a record of payments made to Nazi sympathizers throughout Oregon and Washington. American citizens who were being paid to provide safe houses, transportation routes, and intelligence to German operatives. Evangeline Blackwood's name appeared on every page. At the bottom of the strongbox was a child's diary, its pages yellow and brittle with age. It belonged to Cordelia Blackwood, and the final entries told a story that broke my heart. August 10th, 1943. The scary men are here again. Mama told me to stay in my room, but I heard them talking about hurting people. They have pictures of soldiers and they're planning something bad. August 12th, 1943. I saw one of the men hit Mama when she said she wanted to stop helping them. He said they would kill both of us if she tried to leave. I'm scared. August 15th, 1943. I hid in the basement tonight and heard everything. They're going to attack a place where our soldiers are staying. Lots of people will die. I have to tell someone. I have to stop them. The final entry was barely legible. August 16th, 1943. I tried to call the police, but the scary man caught me. He said I know too much. He said little girls who can't keep secrets have to go away forever. Jerome was reading over my shoulder, his face grim. That poor kid overheard them planning an attack on American troops. She tried to stop them, and they killed her for it. But then my phone rang, shattering the horrible silence that had fallen over us. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but when I answered, the voice on the other end made my heart stop. "Vera," the voice was weak, confused, but unmistakably familiar. "Celeste," I could barely speak. "Celeste, is that you? Where are you?" "I don't know," she said, and I could hear her crying. "I'm in some kind of hospital. They said I've been here for 3 months, but I don't remember how I got here. The doctors said I had some kind of breakdown, that I was found wandering on a highway in California with no memory of who I was. My legs went weak. You're alive. Oh God, Celeste, you're alive." "Vera, I remember now. That night at the mansion, I found what Cordelia was trying to show me. I dug up the strongbox just like you did. But when I opened it, someone grabbed me from behind. A man's voice said some secrets are worth more than one little girl's life." Then everything went black. Jerome was already on his other phone, calling his contacts at the FBI. But I had one more question for my sister. "Celeste, the man who attacked you, did you see his face?" "No, but I heard him talking to someone else after he knocked me out. He said they'd been watching the mansion for decades, waiting for someone to get too close to the truth. He said the network was still active, still protecting the people whose names were in those documents." The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. This wasn't just about a murder that happened 80 years ago. The Nazi collaborator network that killed Cordelia Blackwood was still operating, still eliminating threats to their secret. And now they knew that both Celeste and I had discovered their buried evidence. The FBI arrived at the Blackwood estate within 6 hours of Jerome's call. What started as a search for my missing sister had become a federal investigation into a Nazi collaborator network that had been operating on American soil for over 80 years. Agent Sarah Kellerman, the lead investigator, told us that the documents we found were some of the most significant evidence of domestic Nazi activity ever discovered. The names in that ledger included prominent business leaders, politicians, and community figures from across the Pacific Northwest. Many of their descendants were still alive, still benefiting from wealth built on Nazi blood money. "Your sister stumbled onto something that powerful people have killed to protect," Agent Kellerman explained, as teams of forensic experts carefully excavated the rest of the Rose Garden. "We've been tracking rumors of this network for years, but we never had proof." They found Cordelia's remains exactly where the 8-year-old had been pointing in Celeste's dreams. She was buried in a small wooden coffin, wearing a white dress, clutching a small American flag. The medical examiner confirmed what we already knew. She had been strangled, not drowned. But the most important discovery came when they arrested Heinrich Mueller, a 94-year-old man living under an assumed name just 2 towns over from Millbrook Falls. He had been monitoring the mansion for decades, eliminating anyone who got too close to the truth. When FBI agents searched his house, they found surveillance photos of everyone who had ever shown interest in the Blackwood mystery, including dozens of pictures of Celeste taken in the weeks before her disappearance. Under interrogation, Mueller confessed to killing Cordelia Blackwood in 1943. He had been a young SS officer, tasked with coordinating the planned attack on a nearby military training facility. When Cordelia overheard the meeting and tried to call for help, Mueller strangled her to protect the operation. He forced Evangeline to help bury the evidence and stage the drowning, threatening to kill her too if she ever told the truth. The attack on the military facility never happened because Cordelia's disappearance triggered a massive police investigation that forced the Nazi cell to abandon their plans. That brave 8-year-old girl had saved countless American lives with her courage, and no one ever knew. Mueller also confessed to attacking Celeste. When she found the strongbox that night, he drugged her and drove her to California, where he abandoned her on a highway with enough sedatives in her system to cause temporary amnesia. He thought she would die from exposure, but a truck driver found her and got her to a hospital. Celeste came home 3 weeks later. The amnesia was wearing off, and she remembered more details every day. The first thing she said when she saw me was, "I'm sorry I couldn't explain it better before. I know how crazy it all sounded." But I was the one who needed to apologize. I should have listened to you. I should have believed that you were trying to help someone. She smiled, the first real smile I'd seen from her in months. You believed me when it mattered most. You finished what I started. We donated the Blackwood estate to the National Park Service, where it now serves as a memorial to Cordelia Blackwood and the other victims of Nazi activity on American soil. Cordelia finally received a proper burial next to her mother in the Millbrook Falls Cemetery, with full military honors for the courage she showed in trying to protect American soldiers. The case made national headlines. The surviving members of the Nazi network were prosecuted under war crimes legislation. Families whose ancestors had been named in the ledger faced public scrutiny and federal investigation. Justice was finally served, 80 years too late. People always ask me if I believe in the supernatural now. I tell them I believe in something more powerful than ghosts. I believe in justice. I believe in the courage of little girls who risk everything to do what's right. And I believe in the bond between sisters, even when one of them talks to the dead. Celeste still paints her abstract pieces, but now she also works with law enforcement agencies, helping them solve cold cases through her unique intuitive abilities. She calls it listening to the voices that history forgot. As for me, I learned that sometimes the most logical thing you can do is trust the illogical. Sometimes the truth has been waiting a century for someone brave enough to dig it up. And sometimes the dead really do speak to those willing to listen. Cordelia Blackwood finally got to tell her story, and it changed everything.